The chapter begins as Cheon Yeowon grabbed his blade with just 2 fingers while the blade was charged with lightning chi. The air crackled with raw, untamed energy, sparking dangerously close to flesh, yet he remained perfectly calm. Mek Yeojong, the leader of Black Shadow Squad, stared wide-eyed, wondering how he could wield a sword filled with lightning chi like that. It defied all common sense of martial arts cultivation. He was not even drawing the lightning into himself to ground it, yet he was not getting electrocuted. The volatility of the energy should have torn his fingers apart, but instead, it submitted to his touch. Cheon Yeowon called Mek Yeojong pathetic, seeing how weak his lightning chi was. His voice was cold, carrying a tone of absolute disappointment rather than mere insult. He told him, this is what real lightning chi is like, as he charged the blade with his own lightning chi. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. A golden lightning chi, bright and flashy, surrounded around them, illuminating the dark tent with a blinding radiance that felt like the wrath of the heavens itself. Mek Yeojong screamed in extreme pain. The intensity of the golden lightning was not just visual, it carried a scorching heat and a paralyzing shock that ravaged his nerves. He was barely holding himself from getting unconscious, his vision blurring as his body convulsed involuntarily. Trying to expel the lightning from his body, he wondered why he couldn't do it. His internal energy, usually obedient, was being suppressed and devoured by this superior force. He realized with dawning horror that if that goes on, he'll die. Cheon Yeowon mocked him, saying Mek Yeojong was holding out better than he expected. It was a cruel compliment, spoken while looking down at a struggling ant. The force of the Blue Sky Brotherhood, watching their leader writhe in agony, thought they had to attack Cheon Yeowon first and force him to let go of his sword. Desperation fueled their courage. They believed that if they wished to create a new world for the Blue Sky Brotherhood, they must protect their leader at all costs. Keeping this thought in their mind, they rushed forward to attack Cheon Yeowon to rescue their leader. They moved as one, shouting battle cries to suppress their own fear. Cheon Yeowon turned at them with a smiling face while holding the blade with his right hand. The smile did not reach his eyes, it was the expression of a predator amused by prey. He pointed his left hand toward them as a blue aura surrounded his hand. It was a suffocating pressure, heavy and cold. By the pressure of his chi, the warriors from the Blue Sky Brotherhood fell into the ground one by one. It was as if gravity itself had increased 100-fold directly upon their shoulders. The force of the fall cracked the ground beneath them, creating spiderweb fractures in the stone floor. They couldn't even lift their heads. Seeing the scene unfolding before his eyes, Gak Yun, the abbot of the Shaolin Temple, thought if that continues, everyone in the Brotherhood would die. The sheer gap in power was undeniable. Thinking this, he rushed forward to attack Cheon Yeowon with his technique, Dragon Claw Hand. His fingers curved into hardened claws, imbued with the righteous golden energy of Buddhism, aiming to disrupt Cheon Yeowon's flow. Cheon Yeowon easily dodged the attack stepping aside with the grace of a phantom. He looked at the monk and said he was not killing Gak Yun only because he was a Shaolin monk. It was a mercy born of respect for the sect, not for the man himself. Saying this, Cheon Yeowon attacked him with 2 sword chi blades. The invisible slashes cut through the air with a high-pitched whine. Gak Yun was thrown back several meters from the force of the attack. He skid across the floor, his robes torn, barely managing to regain his footing. Gak Yun wondered how could he release such a massive burst of lightning chi while maintaining a technique that refined. Usually, power came at the cost of control, but this man possessed both in perfect harmony. He couldn't figure out how it was possible. Everyone panicked seeing Gak Yun's condition. If even the renowned abbot of Shaolin was tossed aside like a ragdoll, what hope did they have? Mu Guchen's face turned pale as he thought how could the head Shaolin monk look like an ordinary person before Cheon Yeowon. The hierarchy of the martial world seemed to crumble in seconds. He called him a master who had transcended the realm of life and death. In his mind, he compared Cheon Yeowon with the Eastern caste god as his pressure was as overwhelming as his. It was the presence of a supreme being, one that demanded submission. Cheon Yeowon finally let go of the sword from his hand. The blade clattered to the floor, no longer needed. Mek Yeojong was kneeling before him as his body was still surrounded by the lightning chi, twitching sporadically. Mek Yeojong tried to escape, thinking of the Blue Sky Brotherhood's future, but his body didn't move. His muscles were fried, unresponsive to his will. Mek Yeojong became bold, or perhaps bald, as his hair burned from the extreme lightning chi, leaving scorched patches on his scalp. Cheon Yeowon mockingly told him to stay still. It was a command that Mek Yeojong had no choice but to obey. Then he pointed his finger towards Mek Yeojong. The tip of his finger glowed with a condensed, ominous energy. Mek Yeojong cried out in fear, asking him to stop. He pleaded, his dignity forgotten in the face of oblivion. But it was too late. A beam of blue light pierced through Mek Yeojong's chest. It was swift, precise, and silent. As the light passed, he felt a burning sensation in his chest, followed by a terrifying emptiness. Suddenly, he felt an extreme pain in his dantian. The center of his martial arts, the core of his existence, shattered. He started rolling in the ground from pain, clutching his stomach, wailing like a wounded beast. Cheon Yeowon then taunted everyone, saying there were too many pests around, so he will save his questions for later. He looked around the devastated tent with disdain. A blue aura surrounded his hand again, but this time it felt colder than the deepest winter. Everyone recognized it as Yin Chi. Ice crystals started to form in Mek Yeojong's chest. The frost spread rapidly, covering his limbs, silencing his screams. Mek Yeojong asked him to kill him because he does not want to be humiliated. To live as a cripple, frozen and displayed, was a fate worse than death for a martial artist. But before he could finish his plea, he was trapped inside an ice bubble. He was preserved in a frozen tomb, his expression of agony locked in ice. Seeing this unfolding before his eyes, the Shaolin abbot Gak Yun wondered how could one human possess so many types of qi. It contradicted the laws of nature. And he wondered if the demon god is truly a monster on par with the Eastern caste god, Ark Wui. The comparison terrified him. The other key figures of the Righteous Alliance were stunned to see Mek Yeojong's dantian being crushed and sealed him in ice. They identified Cheon Yeowon as a terrifying future threat, ruthless to the bone. He showed no hesitation, no mercy, and no weakness. The same thought crossed Muguchin's mind. He also thought that if the demon god truly unleashes his power, then the balance of the three great forces will collapse. The delicate peace held together by fear would vanish. And right now, he was standing alone right at the heart of the Martial Artists Alliance's army. It was a singular opportunity. So, for the future of Murim, he was ready to sacrifice his life and die together with the demon god. He tightened his grip on his weapon, resolving to take this monster down with him. Then the strategist of the alliance contacted with Muguchin through telekinesis. The voice echoed in his head, urgent and desperate. He said no matter what happens, they must force the demon god to fight the Eastern Coast god. If the demon god was the type to negotiate, then their previous talks would have succeeded. But as he already knew their plan, diplomacy was dead. Their only option was to make them fight each other so that they could seize the remnants. It was a desperate gambit, using one monster to kill another. Muguchin then threatened him, saying that he infiltrated in their tent undetected. He spoke loudly, his voice booming to mask his internal fear. And asked if he thought he could leave from there unscathed with 5,000 elite martial artists alliance troops around. While saying this, he gathered chi around his fist and destroyed the tent to the ground. The fabric ripped apart, and the support beams snapped, revealing the army surrounding them. Everyone from the Martial Artists Alliance was stunned to see the demon god Cheon Yeowon standing before their eyes. The legendary figure was real, and he was right there. Someone shouted, "What were the guards doing?" Panic rippled through the ranks. Muguchin screamed at the soldiers of the alliance, saying the demon god had stormed into their camp. He rallied them, shouting, and asked them if they would just stand by and watch. His voice snapped them out of their stupor. Hearing these words, everyone rushed forward to attack. The 5,000 elite soldiers of the Alliance stood firm in their position, drawing their weapons, creating a wall of steel and killing intent. Cheon Yeo-woon, with a cold expression, asked Mu Gutchen if that was his answer. He looked at the army not as a threat, but as a minor inconvenience. Seeing his expression, Sate thought he was surrounded by 5,000 troops, but there was not even a hint of fear in his eyes. He truly lived up to the title of demon god. Mu Gutchen then shouted at Cheon Yeo-woon while pointing his blade towards him. He said, "You speak frankly," and claimed he didn't want any pointless slaughter. He tried to justify their actions. He told him that the Alliance was only concerned about him obtaining another spirit core. He tried to reason with him, saying that frightened them. Even after all that, the Righteous Alliance and the Demon Sect remain allies, theoretically. And said if he swore to stop pursuing the spirit beast, they would lower their swords at the very moment. It was a final ultimatum. But if he intended to fight them to the bitter end, they would fight with their lives on the line. And asked him to choose if he would abandon the spirit beast for the peace with his allies or he would push this to the bitter conclusion. Hearing this, Cheon Yeo-woon swung his sword with full force. He didn't even bother to answer with words, his blade was his reply. The invisible force of the swing killed many of the Alliance troops instantly, their bodies torn apart before they could even scream. Mu Gutchen bent down and barely dodged the attack. The wind of the blade shaved off hairs from his head. With a face full of fear and anger, he saw the body parts of the troops flying scattered across the field. The smell of blood filled the air instantly. He told Cheon Yeo-woon that he truly desired bloodshed in the end. Cheon Yeo-woon rushed forward to attack Mu Gutchen. He moved like a blur, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Mu Gutchen deflected the attacks using all of his strength while falling back. With the force of the attacks, he was thrown back several meters, his feet carving furrows in the earth. But then he realized Cheon Yeo-woon had vanished. He looked left, right, nothing. Before he could react, Cheon Yeo-woon grabbed him by his neck and lifted him into the air. Mu Gutchen kicked his legs helplessly, dangling like a child. But even in the situation of life and death, Mu Gutchen tried to stab Cheon Yeo-woon in the belly with his sword. It was a final, desperate strike for survival. But Cheon Yeo-woon grabbed his hand and broke it just by squashing hard. The sound of bones crunching was sickeningly loud. As Mu Gutchen was losing consciousness, his vision fading to black, he tried to say something about the Alliance. He wanted to utter one last threat, one last justification. But before he could finish, Cheon Yeo-woon showed a face full of anger. His patience had run out completely. He glared at the broken man in his grip and said, if he didn't get tired of saying that word. The disdain in his voice was the last thing Mu Gutchen heard. Please subscribe if you liked the video, stay tuned for the next update. Thanks for watching.